right. At this point, I will hand it over to Janita. Janita, take it away.
Thank you, Bio. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you today to talk about NEDP for intake staff. I'm going to ask another question, slightly different from the poll that Bio just launched. I would really like to see your level of experience in NEDP, regardless of your role. Are you a trained NEDP advisor assessor, not an advisor assessor, but very familiar with NEDP, somewhat familiar, or not yet familiar? Just put the number into the chat box if you would, please. I just want to get a sense. Oh, 3.5. We're going with decimals now, right? Okay. Just want to get a sense of who we are. Trudy was not satisfied with our 4 options. She wanted to let us know she was been doing this for 22 years. Yay, Trudy. All right, so we've got a really good range of experience levels in NEDP. That's great. I'm still going to treat you all as though you know very little, next to nothing about NEDP. So I don't mean to talk down to those of you in the group who have a lot of experience, but the point of this workshop was really to reach out to those who have not been trained in NEDP, who are intake staff, so they're working at an agency that provides NEDP, but they themselves are not the advisor or assessor. They're the folks at the front line who are taking in potential clients, taking in adult learners, helping to assist those learners in finding the best fit, the light things, I'm not moving enough, and getting them into the program that's going to work best for them. So it's really by design that we wanted to particularly target a conversation with support staff, because I think support staff is so very essential in an adult education program. I was a program manager in Virginia for 10 years. My beloved support staff, Becky, was the frontline person, and what she would always say about her role was that she knew that everyone who walked into our office asking for a high school credential, seeking a credential, had come from a background of not being successful in education. One thing or another, or a number of things had happened to them when they were in high school that prevented them from reaching that goal. And so there's a lot of fear, there's some confusion, there's definitely, this is something that they really had to get their courage together to make that call or walk into the office that first day. And she really looked at that as such an opportunity to make a connection with someone, to make them glad that they finally did this for the weeks or the months or the years that they've been thinking about how important it is to finish their high school education. Today was the day that they decided to do it. And she knew that she was at a make or break point for those adult learners. And you're at that make and break point as well. So the more you understand about all of the options that your agency provides for a high school credential, the better you can do at making sure that folks get their best fit, the program in which they're most likely to be successful. And it's also worth mentioning, as I'm sure you know, that adults who want to finish high school most often come into our programs asking for the GED. They think that's what they want because that's the brand name they're familiar with. So I'd like, when that term goes into your ear, for you to kind of think about it as they're not so much asking for their GED as communicating in the best way that they know how that they need a high school credential. So my role as an intake person will be to give them all of the options that we provide and help them find the best option for them. So the options that your agency probably provides would be the high school equivalency exam. I think that's the GED in Maryland. Some of you may be from other states that have other high school equivalency exams. Of course, the NEDP, and you may have something additional. You may have some kind of a credit completion, credit recovery kind of program where people come in and finish the coursework that they needed in 11th and 12th grade to graduate. So we want to be sure that you really understand all of those options in terms of the typical questions that adult learners want to know. What are the prerequisites? What do I need to do before I'm allowed to enter this program? How long is this going to take? How much work is it going to take for me to do on a weekly or monthly basis? How often do I need to be here in the office or in the classroom with you all? How can I make this work with the other things I have going on in my life? Okay, so those are some questions I want you to keep in mind about NEDP as we go forward. The people who I think you'll begin to identify as appropriate clients for NEDP tend to be folks who are better at doing things than they are at testing. There is some testing in NEDP, some preliminary testing that are timed, multiple choice, but once we get finished with those at the very beginning of the program, your adult learners will have no more time tests. They'll have no more multiple choice questions all the way through the end of NEDP. They're really performing tasks in this program rather than testing. And that appeals to a lot of people. It's kind of a shame that we have to start out with some testing anyway, and they see that at the beginning, but it can be really motivating for your adult learners to know once we get finished with this preliminary testing, you're done testing. There's still a lot of assessment that we'll do, but it's performance assessment. That testing needs to determine that you've got clients who are at or near the high school level in both reading and math. And we're thinking about 8th or 9th grade or so at the minimum to be eligible to enter NEDP. If you've been in adult ed for a long time, you may remember the old NEDP program, the paper-based NEDP program before CASAS took this program on. That was a totally different in terms of content, that was a completely different program. The philosophy was the same, but the content was simpler, I would say. The work was simpler. There's a lot of work in the modern web-based NEDP. It's different kind of work than the GED. It's a lot more based on things that people do in life and work, but it is a lot of work. There are no two ways about it. So this is not an easy way out. We need to make sure that our clients are ready to do a significant amount of work and that their skills are at or near the 9th grade level. Folks need to be able to write a well-developed essay. They'll have to do that both in the preliminary diagnostic phase and then later on several times in generalized assessment. And what we're looking for is someone who can respond to a prompt, who can present development of the reasons why they have that response to the prompt with lots of detail and, a well-organized essay. And we do look at standards of English conventions, but that's not the primary thing we're looking at. If we've got someone who's written a well-developed, well-organized essay, but has some grammatical errors, has some punctuation errors, and so on, that some of that can be overlooked as long as the client's ideas are still clear. So just keep that in mind, that if you've got especially like a second language learner, someone who's not a master at standard English conventions, they can still write a well-developed essay that will be considered to demonstrate mastery in NEDP. We need to have folks who can work well independently. If you've got clients or adult learners who really need that kind of push and pull from their instructor to get their work done, they really depend on that structure of a classroom, they may not be the most appropriate NEDP clients. These need to be folks who can go home with a set of work to complete, and they have the time management and the personal management to finish that work in the allotted amount of time. And another consideration is NEDP can be a great option for adults who may have reasons why they can't make it into your classes regularly. I mean, many of us have classes on Monday and Wednesday night from 6 to 9. But if you've got someone who has transportation or childcare issues, someone who lives at the far reaches of your geographic area, someone who has a job where they have maybe swing shifts, or they're driving a truck, or they have other things going on that prevent them from being able to come into your class for that amount of time, NEDP can be a great option for them because they can work on their activities at home or any place they have internet access and a computer at any time, middle of the night, weekends, whenever they've got time to do it. Okay, check the chat and make sure we don't have questions so far. Bio, I don't know if you saw this, but is there room for more participants? Some people are waiting. Okay, let's keep going. So we want to really talk today about 3 sort of phases of NEDP. I want to talk about pre-enrollment, what we do before a potential client enrolls. I want to talk about the diagnostic phase, which is the first and shorter of the NEDP phases, and then generalized assessment, where most of the work happens. Okay, so before you enroll a client into NEDP, really before they make the choice that this is the credentialing option they want to go with, you should give them an information session. This is just basically giving information about all of the credentialing options that your agency provides. It's not an NEDP sales pitch so much as it is laying out all of the options, You know, what do you already have in place? What are your goals? How do you learn best? And what's going to be the best fit for you? So I'm going to leave the PowerPoint for just a second and play for you an NEDP information session.
The NEDP Information Session is an important part of client intake. In this session, an advisor or other agency staff outlines the high school credential options offered by the agency. This helps clients choose the most appropriate option. The information session may be presented one-on-one or to a group. In this following example session, an advisor meets one-on-one with an adult learner who wants to earn a high school credential.
Hi, Margaret. I'm Janita. Hello. How are you today? I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I'm great. So I understand that you're here because you want a high school credential. I do. I think that it's time I need to go forward and get my high school diploma. I bet you've been thinking about doing this for a while. I have. It's taken me quite a bit of time to work up courage to come in for this. So what made you decide to come in the door today? I have a job that's really not a very good job. It's only part-time. And my boss told me that if I had a high school credential, that I could probably go into a full-time position and I could get health benefits. And this is something I really need in my life. Great. Well, I'm glad to tell you that here at Capital City, we have 3 ways for you to earn a high school credential. So let's talk about different options. Okay. So the first option is the high school equivalency test. And this is a timed test that has a lot of standardized multiple choice questions and some extended writing. Have you ever taken one of the high school equivalency tests before? I took one of the practice tests. I was on my computer and the practice test popped up in a box. So I went through some of the questions. But it really wasn't a very good experience for me. Okay, remember how you did on it? I didn't do very well, and I think that I know this stuff. But when it was a test, and I got all nervous, and I couldn't finish, and I just really didn't feel good about it. I understand. A lot of adults don't feel like testing is the best way for them to show up in. So I'm glad to say that's not our only option. Another option is a high school credit completion program. And this is where we figure out how many credits you needed, all the requirements you still needed to fulfill to graduate from high school, and you can pick those up in our classes. Where were you when you left high school? What grade were you in? I was in the 10th grade, and then I had some family problems, and so I didn't finish the 10th grade. Okay, so you probably need to pick up quite a few credits to go that route. And that's something we can consider. You can get a transcript from your home high school, and we can take a look at that and see what you'd still need to do and get an idea about how long that would take if that's something you want to consider. You know, I really don't feel like I want to go back and sit in class with a whole bunch of other people. Okay, I understand that. And it's hard sometimes when you're working to come to a class certain days of the week, certain times. So I understand that. So there's a third option. It's called the National External Diploma Program. We call it NEDP for short. And it's very different from credit completion. It's very different from a high school equivalency test. This is a competency-based program. So you work through the program by demonstrating that you've mastered these certain set of skills that all adults need to have in order to be considered a high school graduate. Now that sounds really interesting. I'd like to hear more about that option. Okay, so let's talk about kind of how that works. There are 2 main phases in NEDP. The first phase that you start with is called the diagnostic phase. And that's kind of a preliminary phase where we're making sure that your reading and writing and math skills are strong enough to do the high school level work that you'll have to do in the program. And we also give you kind of a preview of all the skills you'll have to demonstrate once you really get into the work of the program. So you'll do a self-assessment checklist where you take a preliminary look at all those skills and you say to yourself, I know how to do this, or these are some things I'm going to need to learn. And that's both for content skills and for digital literacy skills, because this is an online program. All of the work is completed online. Most of it's done at home. The only time you really come into our office is once every 1 to 2 weeks to do what's called an in-office check. So that happens in the generalized assessment phase. In the generalized assessment phase, there are 8 competency areas, and you work through those one at a time. And by competency areas, these are things like health literacy, 21st century workplace, consumer awareness. So you'll see that those are not typically academic subjects, but they're things that adults really need to know about to be successful in the workplace or in real life. So you work through those areas one at a time, and you do most of the work at home. You come in every 1 to 2 weeks and meet with your assessor for those proctored in-office checks. And that's basically how the program rolls until you've demonstrated everything in the program. That sounds really interesting. How long would it take me to finish? It takes most adults 6 to 9 months to finish the program. Some people can go more quickly, some take a little longer because everyone's working at their own pace. And after I complete all that work, then what happens? So there's one other step, and that's that a second trained assessor looks at all of your work and kind of guarantees or confirms that everything that your assessor said demonstrated mastery does in fact demonstrate mastery. So if my person says that the work that I did was 100%, why does somebody else have to look at it? So that's a good question. So this is a high school diploma. It's a really big deal. We take it very seriously. And because this is a program of 100% mastery, we want to make sure that nothing has slipped through the cracks. So having 2 people look at your work independently and make sure that everything demonstrates mastery ensures that you have the skills of a high school graduate. That makes sense. After I finish all of the work, what happens next? Where do I go next? So that's the exciting part. At that point, we give you a transcript that shows that you've completed all the work in the program. You get a real high school diploma. And we have a graduation ceremony in June, and you can walk across the stage with the other graduates. That's so exciting. When I left school, I never thought that I would be able to get a high school diploma and become a graduate. And that's the most exciting part, and it's not too late. Thank you so much. I'm really interested in this, so how do I start?
As you see, the information session is not an NEDP sales pitch. The purpose is to provide information to find the best credential fit for each learner. For more information, see the information session outline and the NEDP flowcharts on the NEDP professionals page.
Okay, we asked for some impressions. I'd like to go into the chat and see what we've got in here. Client needs to take notes. It's a lot of information. Good point. There is a printed flow chart as a visual aid. Thank you, Millie. On the professionals page, there is information that you can use for the information session. There's kind of a checklist of a bunch of things that you want to remember to say, and a flow chart that can be given to the prospective client to tell them sort of how things begin and what it looks like as they go through it. Lori asks, do we have access to the NEDP professionals page? If you don't, Lori, then all of the NEDP staff at your agency does, and they can provide that to you. Right, I think we got most of the impressions. All right, so we're starting with the information session, and if a potential client says that they do want to enroll in NEDP, then we're going to start some pre-screening. So I want to give you some pre-screening options. Let me underscore that we don't do all of this. We're going to do some of this. We really want to get a sense of where these folks are academically and where they are with some non-academic skills. So you're going to be able to pick and choose. But as Bio knows, she's heard me say this a million times, I think of NEDP as having 2 gates. The first gate is a pre-screening gate, and there are lots of ways to open that gate up and get into the diagnostic phase of the program. So let's talk about that first, with the understanding that the second gate will be in diagnostics. Okay, so you can do academic pre-screening in a number of ways. The CASAS appraisal is sort of a quick way to find out if the client is in the correct level that they'll need to take in NEDP. The CASAS appraisal, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is like the TABE locator. It's just a kind of a quick survey of questions that will result in a level, not a usable scale score, but a level. So we want a client whose appraisal is at the D level or the very top of the C level in reading and in the CD level in math. Another thing that a lot of Maryland agencies do is to go ahead and give the CASAS pretest right up front. Those are NRS reportable pretests as long as you're using the goal series. And we're looking at a score for the first gate at or near the 226 in math and the 236 in reading. Eventually, when we get to that second gate in the diagnostic phase, the client will have to meet or exceed those cut scores. But an agency could say, if a client was at a 224, 225 in math, or really close to the reading cut, they could say, let's go ahead and get into NEDP. Let's start working through the diagnostic phase and try the math or reading again in just a little while. after you've gotten a little bit of remediation. If they're not very close to those scores, one or both of those scores, they really ought to go back into ABE and do some skill building before they enter NEDP. It's a good idea to do a quick writing screening, just a paragraph or two. The CASAS goals writing screening is one thing you can use. Again, it's on the professionals page, but really any prompt that is not one of the official NEDP written prompts, but any other prompt that asks the client a question that anyone can answer because it doesn't require any specialized knowledge. Just kind of asking for someone's opinion on something and asking them to support that opinion with some development and details. That would give you a good idea of what the client's writing skills look like and whether they're likely to be strong enough to pass the NEDP written prompt. If you've already got TABE scores, use them. Use them for the pre-screening. They won't work for the second gate in the diagnostic phase. We'll have to use CASAS tests for that. But if you've already got current existing TABE scores, you might as well use those to see if it shows that the client is at or near about 8th grade on the TABE grade equivalency. If they are, they're probably going to do fine on the CASAS tests and they're ready to enroll. It's a good idea to screen for special learning needs, asking potential clients if they've had an IEP when they were in school, if they've got any diagnosed learning disabilities, because that will impact the way that you give the preliminary tests. A client may require time and a half or double time. They may be allowed to, have something special like a reader or a scribe. So keep that in mind. That's a good question to ask during pre-NEDP, during intake. There are several ways that you can pre-screen clients non-academically to see if they have the kind of self-management skills that they need to be successful in NEDP. A couple of ideas, and again, I wouldn't do all of this, but just to pick and choose, you could assign the sample competency. Again, it's available on the professionals page. It's an old discontinued NEDP competency from health literacy that has an activity and a resource that the client would take home and complete the activity based on the information in the resource. And then the client or potential client could come back in and do an in-office check with anyone. It wouldn't even have to be with a trained advisor assessor because this is not an official part of the program. It's just a sample. And that sample mirrors the flow of generalized assessment with, a take-home activity, using a resource to work on some information, and then using what was learned to apply to a proctored in-office check. So that's a really good way to see if you've got a client who's likely to go home, do the work that was assigned to them, and be ready when they come back in. You can also screen for both distance learning and digital literacy and access. There are lots of good screening tools for free on the internet that will help you determine whether this is a good distance learning client, someone who's likely to do the work on their own at home, and who importantly has the tech that they need at home or wherever they're going to be working. Do they have a computer or a Chromebook on which they can do this work? Do they have a good, strong internet access, and so on? A couple other things you could do is have an interview with that potential client, ask some questions that will give you an idea about what kind of worker they are, what's going on in their lives that will prevent them potentially from working on this academic work. And you could get recommendations from previous instructors if you've got a client who's moved up from ABE or ESL within your own programs. Okay, if you find that you've got an appropriate NEDP client, it's time for enrollment, and that's when they would start working with an advisor. The advisor works with the client through the diagnostic phase. This is a quicker part of NEDP of the two big phases in the program are the diagnostic phase and generalized assessment. In the diagnostic phase, we're determining that their academic skills are at the level that they need to be successful in the program. So this is where they'll need to take the reading goals and score 226 or higher. They'll need to take the math goals. Reading is 236. Math goals at a 226 or higher, and they'll take the written prompt, which gives them, as we talked about, a prompt that doesn't require any kind of specialized knowledge. They'll just answer based on their own experience and develop their answer with rationale. Those closed diagnostics are proctored. They would happen either in the office or they would happen remotely over a platform like Zoom. where the advisor could monitor and proctor the client's work, making sure that it is the client himself or herself who's doing this work to get into the program. The open diagnostics happen between sessions on the client's own time. There are a couple of self-assessment checklists. One goes through all of the competencies in NEDP and asks the client, do you already know how to do this work, basically? And I think this really builds confidence because the client will see a lot of things that they're going to be asked to do in the program that they already know how to do, because they're just things that come up in our regular day-to-day lives or in our work. There's also a technology self-assessment checklist that lists all of the technology skills that clients will need to have or develop in the course of the NEDP portfolio. We identify the college and career competency. This is probably my favorite part of the diagnostic phase. This is where clients really figure out, why am I in NEDP? What is this doing in terms of the continuum of where I am in the world of work or in my life? How can I get credit for what I've already done? Like if someone already has an occupational license or a good solid work history, or how can it prepare me for what I want to do next? Maybe that's enrolling in post-secondary education or training. Maybe that's a job that they just got and they want to keep. There are lots and lots of ways to demonstrate this very individualized competency, and it's really based on every client's specific history and plans for the future, kind of where NEDP fits in that continuum. And finally, the clients will complete the Department of Labor ONET Occupational Interest Profiler. It's kind of a fun interest profiler that will result in a few best fit and great fit occupations that the client can explore now and later on in the generalized assessment phase. So when all 7 of these instruments are finished, the client moves from the diagnostic phase into generalized assessment. In some cases, they may start to work with a new staff at this point, because some agencies have one staff as the advisor and a different staff as the assessor. But it can be the same staff person all the way through if the agency wants to operate that way. And there are benefits to doing it either way. It's just a matter of personal preference. Okay, so the client has now finished all 7 diagnostic instruments, and now we're moving on to the generalized assessment phase. This is where the real work in the program happens. I want to go back and check the chat real quick. Eloise asks, will you allow a student to enter the program if they have achieved the math and reading scores, but not the writing skill? Well, that's an interesting question, because the math and reading happens kind of away from the NEDP online system. They happen through CASAS testing, either paper, pencil, or e-testing. But to do the writing assessment, the actual writing assessment in diagnostics, you have to do that in the NEDP system. So a client account would have to be created to do the writing. So what most agencies do, I think, is they make sure they've got a reading and math score at or very close to the cut score before they open up a client seat, a WEU. And then if they have those, and they may also do kind of a pre-screening in writing. Does the client look like they're in the ballpark in as far as writing is concerned? But they actually have to be enrolled before they can do the written prompt. Okay, so clients get into generalized assessment. I want to talk a little bit about the competency areas in this phase. The foundational competencies that you see on the left are interspersed throughout all of the portfolio. Communication and media literacy, basically those are reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills, are found in every competency, in every activity, probably in every question in NEDP. So this isn't its own standalone area. This is an integrated competency area. Applied math and numeracy is found throughout the portfolio as well. It's very heavy in the consumer awareness and financial literacy competency areas, but you also see it in science, you also see it in health. I think you see it in 21st century workplace. So this is not its own area. It's, again, interspersed in the entire portfolio. The same with information and communication technology. These are basically digital literacy skills. And the fact that this is an online program means that clients are always working on digital literacy skills anytime they're in the program, working on activities or in-office checks. But on top of that, We're building a lot of more discrete digital literacy skills in NEDP, everything from writing an email to taking a screenshot and uploading that screenshot to building a PowerPoint presentation, building an Excel spreadsheet. There is a lot of digital literacy in NEDP. The generalized competency areas are the 8 areas that are open for a client, just a few at a time, so that the client can work on just what they have in front of them and focus just on that work. So I don't want to read through all of those 8 competency areas, but we are going to do a little tour in a few minutes and kind of see what some of this looks like. Okay, so let's talk about the flow of generalized assessment. First, I want to make you familiar with the vocabulary. The activities are things that are assigned to the client. An entire competency area is assigned at once, all of health literacy, all of consumer awareness, and so on. And in a 1 to 2 week period, the expectation is that the client completes all of the activities in that competency area. It may be 10 things, it may be 14 things, it's somewhere in that ballpark. It's about 10 hours worth of work, give or take. Some people work more quickly, some people work more slowly and methodically. That's really up to the client. But just to give you an idea, we're looking at about 8 to 10 hours of work to finish all of the activities in a competency area. Then when those activities are finished after that 1 to 2 week period, the client meets with their assessor in an in-office check. This can happen, as the name implies, in the office or in a classroom, in a private testing setting, or it can happen over a remote function like Zoom. The important thing is that the in-office check is proctored. This is how we're sure that the work that's demonstrating mastery in the program is actually the client's work. The one who's seeking the diploma is the one who's doing this work. And we ensure that through those in-office checks. After the in-office check, the client goes off to work on some other activities, and the assessor evaluates all of their work. Almost all of the activities are evaluated. All of the in-office checks are evaluated. And anything that was determined not to demonstrate mastery because it was incorrect or incomplete is reattempted. We call those reattempts post-task assessment, or PTA. So if you hear advisors and assessors talking about PTA, you'll know they don't mean Parent-Teacher Association. They're talking about the reattempted work that clients didn't demonstrate the last time through. How many reattempts can they have? Unlimited. Clients can reattempt the work as many times as it takes to fully demonstrate mastery, because NEDP is a program of 100% mastery. In order to graduate, every single skill in the program has to show mastery. So for that reason, we give clients the opportunity to reattempt things until they get to that point. The final part of generalized assessment is portfolio review. You heard me allude to that in the information session video. This is a second trained and actually certified NEDP assessor who looks over all of the work in a competency area, one area at a time. Once the assessor has said, yep, this area is fully demonstrated, everything is good, the portfolio reviewer looks at it and double checks it to make sure. And the funny thing is, the reviewer almost always finds something that either doesn't in fact demonstrate, or that the reviewer and the assessor need to discuss to determine whether or not it demonstrates. The fact that the reviewer is not just a checkoff, but is really someone who does a cold review and determines in almost every case that something needs to be redone, just reinforces to me how important it is to have this step in NEDP. This is a high school diploma, so we really need to be absolutely sure through the eyes of 2 trained assessors that we've got full demonstration of all of the competencies. Eloise asks, can you give an example of what in-office checks proctored assessment means? Yeah. Eloise, I'm going to do that when we go into the system, when I give a tour, and we're almost there. So I'll give you an example once we get in. That'll make it, I think, as clear as it can be. So trying to create a flow chart of generalized assessment is something I've never really been very successful at doing. I understand it in my head, and this is about the best I can do. The idea is that the client does the take-home activities, and then they do the in-office checks, and they redo any of those things that were considered not to demonstrate. And then once everything in the area is demonstrated by the assessor, The portfolio reviewer looks at it all again. That's almost always going to result in more post-task assessment and a need to redo at least one thing in that area. But once the portfolio reviewer says, I confirm that this all demonstrates mastery, then it's done. Truly and really done. No end of course test, nothing else has to happen. That area is kind of put to the side and the client can focus on something else. So that's kind of that's the ultimate thing that we're looking for, is confirmed, demonstrated by the portfolio reviewer. I just want to go through these questions really quickly and then we'll do the tour. It takes an average of about 6 to 9 months to complete the program. Most often is 6 months. It's taking a little bit longer now because of COVID, but once that goes away, hopefully we'll get back to about a 6-month average for completion. We've seen people complete in as little as 2 months. It's not common, but it's definitely doable. There's no longer a maximum time for completion in Maryland. There used to be a cap of, I think it was 15 months. That's no longer the case. But your agency will want to make sure that you don't have a client who's kind of dragging this whole thing out. The meetings, the in-office checks should be substantive. The client should be working through and completing entire competency areas or big chunks of post-task assessment between meetings. Okay. There are unlimited attempts at competencies. We used to have a rule that after the 3rd attempt at a competency or an activity, the client had to wait, I think it was a month before they could reattempt it. That rule is gone. We no longer have a required amount of time in generalized assessment to wait before you reattempt a competency. And the rationale for that, just if you want to know, is that sometimes people are on their 3rd try and they've almost got it, especially with a big activity like the US Bill of Rights, for example. And if we make them wait a month before they can try it again, you know, how much of that information is going to be gone as the client is working on other things? We really want to strike when the iron is hot. And so there is an unlimited attempt at competencies and no wait time between attempts. There are no multiple choice questions after the diagnostic test. Nothing is timed after diagnostics. Once the client gets into generalized assessment, there are no time clocks. NEDP can be done entirely remotely with every meeting done over Zoom, or it can have a face-to-face component where people are coming into the office or the classroom, or it can be a combination of both. In Maryland, high school NEDP graduates earn a credential from the state. I don't think there's a cost for enrollment in Maryland. This is generally a state or local decision. There are no books, no classes in NEDP. All of the resources are loaded on the portfolio, so the client won't need anything else to complete the program. The access is flexible. Clients can get on to NEDP at any time, morning, noon, or night, anywhere where they have a computer and internet. And there's one more here that doesn't want to pop out. There we go. There's no final exam. When the activities and in-office checks are considered to be fully demonstrated and confirmed by the portfolio reviewer, they are done. Okay, so let's go into the program. I want to make sure I didn't miss any chats. Eileen says the time for tasks and activities is 1 to 2 weeks. What's the average time between identifying a potential client for NEDP and pre-diagnostics and creating a WEU? I don't have that data, Eileen. I'm sorry, because I can tell you how long people are usually in the diagnostic phase, because we can track that by looking at people's diagnostics. But what you're referring to is something that happens before they have a WEU. So I don't know for sure. It seems like it should be fairly quick. You're just doing some pre-screening, you know, some academic and non-academic pre-screening. Okay, so I'm going to hop off of here and hop on to T-Trainer. This is our training website. It looks just like the real NEDP site, except it says training and practice at the top to remind us that this is not real. These are not real people, but we use it, as the name implies, to practice and to train. So let's look at a sample client. First of all, the diagnostic page or tab has the dates that all of the open diagnostic instruments that the client is doing on their own. It has the dates that all of those are completed. And then this table at the bottom will be populated as the client completes the reading test the math test, and the written prompt. And as you see, the written prompt is done right here on the client's web enrollment unit or online seat. What I really want to show you is the work in the program. So I'm going to the evaluation tab. Basically, what I see here is what the client sees. There are a few slight differences between what the assessor sees and what the client sees, but the resources are the same. This list of things to do called the competency tree looks just the same. The questions are the same and so on. The main difference is I can evaluate on my end and they can see my evaluation on their end. So for the sake of training, we have all of the competency areas open at once, this long, long list. In real life, we would never open all that work for a client. That's just way too much for a client to focus on at once. We're going to restrict the number of areas we have open at any one time to 3+ cultural literacy. Let me see where we are on time. Okay, 1:45. All right, so I want to show you something starting in health, the health literacy competency area, because this is the first area that clients work through, and it's the simplest area in terms of depth of knowledge. The least complicated activities are found in health, and that again is by design. We want to give the client an opportunity as they're learning about the content of health literacy. They're also learning how to navigate around the program. They're learning how to do the work. They're learning what the expectations are. They're learning how to use the resources. They're learning how to prepare for an in-office check and so on. So health planning is a good example of that. In this particular competency, there are activities, but no in-office check. I promise we're going to get to an in-office check though. All of the competencies begin with an overview that answers the question that all of our adult learners want to know, which is, why do I need to know how to do this? When is this ever going to come up in my life? Well, health planning is something that's definitely going to come up in the lives of our adult learners. So this gives a little description of what we're going to do in this competency, what the client will be asked to do in each of the activities. And when there's an in-office check, it will also give a brief description of what's coming in the in-office check. No surprises in NEDP. We want the clients to be able to prepare for that proctored in-office check. And so that's why we give them information about what they can expect. So in this first activity, we provide 5 resources, all of which are from the Department of Health and Human Services. And we ask the client to choose just one health planning topic that's important to them: family planning, children's health planning, adult screening tests, and so on. And we don't want them to do all of them because not all of these will be relevant to our particular clients' lives. If we have very young clients who have yet to start a family, family planning might be very interesting and relevant to them. Folks with young kids, children's health planning will be relevant to them, and so on. So in this activity, the client has chosen children's health planning. For that, they're going to use resource 2. So we can go up here and click on resource 2. And as you'll see, this just opens a new tab right next to the NEDP tab. So our client can learn how to, if they don't already know, to tab back and forth between the information that they'll use to develop their answers and the place where they put in their answers. So in this example, we have a full activity of client answers, and we would use this to go in and practice our evaluation. So the kinds of questions that are asked early on in the program are kind of flat, one-dimensional questions. Find the answer and plug it in. These are like depth of knowledge level 1 questions. A lot of them are in health. List 4 types of vaccinations or shots, for example, is something you can easily find on this website. Our client has put in their answers, and when we're ready to evaluate, I don't have to have an answer key or anything like that. All I do is click the evaluation button, and it gives me a list of things that would demonstrate mastery. And if those things are on if the client's answers are on my list, I mark them as demonstrated. If they're not, I don't mark them as demonstrated. I mark ND, in that case, not demonstrated. And I could leave my client a note, a non-instructional procedural note, to tell them that they may want to go back and check the resource, or maybe I could tell them, like in this case, DTaP also contains pertussis, so you can't list that one twice. Whatever kind of procedural note I need to leave, I can leave for the client. I'm going to check the chat and make sure I'm not missing something. Emma asks if it's permissible to print out resources. You can, Emma, and I know some agencies do, but I would just caution you that these resources a lot of them are from live websites, and so they change. And the answers will always be based on, the most recent version of what's on the website. So just know that you're really getting a static copy of a dynamic website in that case. Okay. Trudy said, did you answer the question about having access to the professionals page? What I said about that is if you don't have access, all the advisor assessors in your agency do. So they could ask the advisor assessor to get them whatever they needed. If you want access in particular, if you have someone who needs to be in the professionals page a lot, but is not a trained advisor assessor, just let our office know and we can consider whether or not to give that permission. Okay, so you get a sense of what health literacy looks like. I want to take you farther along in the program and show you a competency in consumer awareness. This will give you a sense of, first of all, what does the in-office check look like? What does the math look like in the program? A lot of our adult learners have serious math fears. And, we do some good, strong, high-level math in this program, but it's all applied to, almost all of it is applied to currency, in fact, some also to measurement and a few other things. But credit cards is a good example of how we use math in NEDP. So again, we've got the overview with the brief description of what the clients will do in the activities and in the in-office check. This one has a tab you haven't seen before called tutorials. Whenever there's a discrete math or digital literacy skill that the client will have to master in the activities or in the in-office check, we provide a tutorial, which is a video with an accompanying transcript that the client can use to build that skill. They could also go to YouTube or any other resource they want to help build that skill, but we do provide those tutorials so that there's an opportunity to learn within the program. So in the first activity, we've got a resource that's a PDF. This would be a good one to print out. Emma, back to your question. This one is how to read your credit card statement. It basically goes through a sample credit card statement. And Bio, are you raising your hand to tell me 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm working, I'm trying. Okay, so this goes through a sample credit card statement and kind of discusses the components of that statement. And then the client will apply that to another sample credit card bill that looks a little different from the one in the activity, but that's kind of, again, by design. And they figure out the components of that credit card bill. And then we get into the math. We've got a person here, Juana, who has an average daily balance of $5,000 on her credit card. Her APR is about 17%. There's an embedded calculator she can use, or she can use a handheld calculator if she likes. Now we get into using some variables, but they're variables that are used in a credit card bill. This can be a complicated equation to use, but we want our clients to understand what do these figures mean and how would you substitute actual numbers for those variables, and then use that to figure out the client's what she owes in interest on her credit card balance. In the second use of interest, we've got the client who has a savings account that has a different kind of APY, and she has to figure out how much interest she's earning on her savings account. And then in this table, we've got a client who has an interest rate of about 13%. She applies that to 3 different average daily balances, and then she applies a penalty interest account. If someone had not paid their bill for a couple months and their interest rate went up to 23%, what would that look like in terms of dollars and cents on that same amount of money as an average daily balance for 3 months? This really drives home to clients why they want to keep their interest rates low. Okay, in the second in-home activity, we've got a few more resources that our clients will be able to use. And here we're doing kind of a higher depth of knowledge activity. We're giving 2 sample credit card offers, which our clients are getting in the mail all the time. We're helping them get familiar with the components of these offers. And then they're going to look at a sample person, Sandra, look at her financial situation, and they're going to determine which of those 2 card offers is a better choice for her and provide the rationale to support that choice. And any of the reasons that are kind of indicated here in this table would be demonstrating reasons. There are lots of different reasons they can choose. but they're really getting into that higher depth of knowledge of evaluation and providing rationale for that evaluation. And then in the last part of the activity, our clients are going to look at minimum monthly payments. We've got a pretend person who's got a $1,000 credit card bill and their minimum monthly payment is $20 a month. How long would it take them to pay that off? And how much total amount of interest would it cost them? Then let's double and triple that minimum monthly payment and look at the difference in the number of months it would take to pay that off and the total amount of interest. It's significantly different. And I think, again, that really drives home what those numbers mean. Yes, you're safe if you're only paying your minimum monthly payment in terms of your credit report, but it's going to take you a lot more time and a lot more money to get that paid off. So now the in-office check. I can show you this because I'm signed in as an assessor, but the client doesn't see this in-office check until it's launched by the assessor. So this is kind of the quiz, so to speak. This is the check. So in this in-office check, you'll see that we're mirroring some of the same skills that the client had an opportunity to practice in the activities. We've gone back to that same table that you saw in activity A with the 2 different interest rates and how those interest rates are different with 3 different monthly amounts. Just again, to reinforce that you want to keep your credit card charges low. So the skill set is the same, the numbers are a little bit different. And that's how the in-office checks tend to go. They build on the skills that were developed and mastered during the activities. Okay, a lot of questions came in while I was doing this, and I don't want to miss any of them. Okay, we talked about printing out, talked about the professionals page. Okay, 10 minutes to go. Many tutorials can be printed. Okay. Nathan wants to study this too. All right, Nathan, we'll enroll you. We'll be glad to do that. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So I'd like to take a minute. I don't even think we have a minute. We might just want to unmute our lines if we can and talk a little bit about what we would want to say to an adult learner about their options for earning a high school credential, or something we want to make sure we say to them about NEDP, something that's going to help them understand what NEDP is all about. Does anybody want to get us started on that? We don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to hear from you. And if you have experience doing that, so much the better. So if you would please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. That way we're not all talking over each other. Or you can type something into the chat box. What is something you would want to make sure that you shared with a potential high school level learner in your program about the NEDP or about the choice between the options that you provide? Anybody? Not easy, but definitely useful information that you'll be learning. Yeah, the applicability for sure. Very important to stress the commitment and time. This is not quick and easy, right? If you've got someone who's this close to earning their GED, who you've given the GED ready to and they scored high, most of the time that person ought to just go to the GED. That's going to be the quickest and best fit for them. NEDP is not for everybody, and it's going to take some time. There are a variety of options, and there's a lot of help along the way, lots of opportunities to learn. Thank you. Yeah, you've got to be committed to getting the work done in this program. Nobody's going to drag you through it. This is really something that you have to be determined to finish on your own. And there are lots of little steps, lots of mini successes along the way, but that commitment is vital. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to just about the end of our time together. Thank you, everyone. It was so great to be with you this morning. If you have any questions at all, feel free to shoot me an email, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, Trudy. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you for attending. Thank you, Janita, for this presentation. We hope that you've gained some perspective that will help you to guide your learners. And please be sure to complete the evaluation survey for this session and request proof of participation if you need it. The bio has posted these links in the chat. We will be sending out the PowerPoint, and the recording will be available on the website. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the Institute.
Thanks, everybody.